Hello everybody and welcome to a very special Pro Tour Theros edition of the Versus Video Series. CVM here, and we have a special guest, KSC, as I'm going to call him from now on, Kenny Snapcaster, filling in for BBD.
Yep.
So we've got this super awesome green-white deck that we're looking at. Now, I know a lot of people are excited to see all the new decks that'll be coming out this weekend from the Pro Tour. However, we do have this really unique green-white deck that won our Open this last weekend in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio. Now, the reason why this deck is very interesting is it's decided to not play some of the very standard cards that you would expect in a green-white deck. So a few weeks back, I played a green-white deck similar to this against BBD when he was playing his Legion of Doom Grixis control deck. Too many Planeswalkers for my taste. But I had Scavenging Ooze and Loxodon Smiter in my deck, but this deck decides not to play Scavenging Ooze and Loxodon Smiter. Kenny, what do you think about that? Do you think that was a good decision or just a risky decision?
I think that the way that the format is really starting to shape up, I mean, you're usually dead before Scavenging Ooze can even get anything in unless you have tons of removal in your deck. A lot of times it'll just be a 2/2 for 2, or maybe even a 2/3 or 3/3 for 2. But I mean, you have cards like Call of the Conclave and Fleece Main Lion where they just come out already and they're already the 3 power, 3 toughness guys that you need. And they're just a 2 mana. Like, the life gain is pretty irrelevant because it's just so late in the game. It's like, if you can trade off all your creatures early with like the red deck and then play Scavenging Ooze, that's the only time it's good. But if you ever have it before like turn 4, it's not very good. Where like these cards are just huge monsters. And also, I really like the Fleece Main Lion just for the fact that, you know, you can give it the hexproof ability against like the blue-white control decks, where like Smiter, you know, he'll get Detention Sphered or he can get Azorius Charmed, and you know, sometimes the Fleece Main Lion, the hexproof is just really what you need.
I definitely agree. I felt that Loxodon Smiter was just a little too slow now that we don't have 2 mana guys that we can actually play. So before we had Arbor Elf and Absence Pilgrim, and then Mystic was printed. So in like the green-white decks, you would have 8 enablers to play Smiter onto.
Right.
But now like we only have the 1 with Mystic, and in a deck like this, you don't even want it. Like, we don't even have Mystic in the deck. So like, why would you play Smiter when you could just play like Call of the Conclave?
Yeah, I agree.
The only thing that I miss from having Smiter is Evolving Experiment 1, but I feel like Boonsater fills that role just as well if you need that, that evolve for the Experiment 1.
Right.
And we also have the one of Tristani to help evolve the Experiment 1 because she got a big old booty and likes to evolve them Experiment 1s. Now, the one unique thing that I noticed from playing this deck, I was helping BBD test last night, and we were playing this deck against his deck that he's planning on playing for the Pro Tour, was that the lack of Scavenging Ooze wasn't that big of a deal, and because our deck is built to not have Ooze in it, we're actually the opposing Oozes aren't that good against us. Like, we're just casting these Call the Conclaves, we're casting these Fleece Main Lions that are never going to die, we are casting this Advent of the Worms, and their Oozes are just like 2/2s or 3/3s at the most, and they're usually only eating their own creatures and not getting extra value out of our deck, which I think is where you want to be if you're going to decide to not play Ooze. I think you have to play Call the Conclave.
Right, definitely.
Going on to the Fleece Main Lion, I actually really like that we have Unflinching Courage in the main. So if you ever get to Monstrous of Fleece Main Lion and then put an Unflinching Courage on it, like any deck with Fanatic of Mogus in it, it's just never going to beat you.
Or a Mountain at all.
Yeah, or a Mountain at all. It's just never going to beat you. So I definitely like that interaction for us. And then we have Rootborn Defenses. So I really like Rootborn Defenses in this deck because it allows us to stay aggressive against the opposing like mid-rangey aggressive-ish decks. Right. Pushing through damage, making attacks that normally would be unfavorable, but then we get to save our team with Rootborn Defenses while furthering our board by populating a 3/3 or a 5/5. I think Rootborn Defenses is a very key part of this deck, being in the main deck and switching over to the calls.
Yeah, Craig Wesco definitely showed us it was a major part of the deck from the last Pro Tour.
Definitely. I also feel that this deck winning and with the Rootborn Defenses in the main, is one of the big reasons there weren't any islands in the top 8 in Cleveland.
Right.
Supreme Verdict doesn't do much when your opponent's just playing a sideboard card in their main deck that completely invalidates your strategy. So like, if you ever get to Rootborn Defenses when your opponent casts a Supreme Verdict to try and stabilize the board, I honestly just feel like they have no shot at winning that game.
Right. Yeah. He's kind of like a frontline medic, the Rootborn Defense, in like some aspects, where like you can just keep jamming your creatures into him and like not really care because you have this card that just makes him, you know, indestructible. But where on the backside, it's kind of like, well, counter your Supreme Verdict too, where that's where frontline medic falls short of.
Definitely. Now, one of the other benefits of the deck is that, well, I wouldn't say a benefit, but because we're just straight green-white, you know, and we don't even have a green-white temple to play, we get stuck playing some, you know, good old country guild gates. But I noticed that this is an aggressive deck, and we don't have any Mutavaults in the deck. Do you think that Mutavault is something that we can worth playing, or because of all of these colored requirements, is it too risky?
It's kind of hard because, you know, like you were saying, it is just 2 colors, and I was actually thinking about that when you were laying the deck out. But I think it's just not worth it, because if you ever get the double Mutavault hand, like you have to instantly mulligan that, and like if you get like a Forest Mutavault, it's still kind of weird because you can't like really cast your Call the Conclave, you can't really cast your Fleece Mainline or your Voice, and Advent of the Worm and Boonsater both are double green, and Tristani is obviously very color intensive, but it's just, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's really worth it to make like your deck a little bit inconsistent, just like on the just like the 2 power isn't gonna be worth it at all, I don't think.
I definitely agree. I'm happy that we didn't go with Mutavaults for this deck. I think that it would have been very risky, and from playing the big Boros deck with Boros Reckoner, cards like this are just not good friends with Mutavault. So,
right.
So I definitely really like the main deck. I like the changes that he made to it. I feel like Smiter is just not where you want to be. It's just pretty poo at the moment. And I really like Call the Conclave with Rootborn Defenses. So let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboard and see what unique options we have to try and shore up problem matches. All right, we are back with the sideboard for the green-white aggro deck. I guess we can continue to call it. Since we do have, Experiment 1, he's pretty aggressive. Doesn't like to block very well.
Right.
Well, very much. He does block pretty well when you need him to. So we've got 2 Pithy Needle. I really like Pithy Needle in the current standard meta. There are all these extremely powerful planeswalkers that people are going to be playing, like Jace, Ashiok, Elspeth. Vraska is also a very powerful one that I think a lot of people forgot about.
Yeah.
And I just really like Pithy Needle right now. In addition, you have these gimmicky decks that are playing a bunch of devotion cards and some of the gods, and this can also shut off the gods as well. So if anybody happens to assemble Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, and Heliod, you can just get overrun very quickly.
Right.
So I really like Pithy Needle. What do you think about Pithy Needle? Do you think it's something that a lot of people should be looking at?
It's definitely one of those cards that you're either in love with it or you hate it, and I'm not really in love with it just because it's like your deck wants to be doing one thing, and that's killing them with huge monsters. And Pithy Needle is one of the cards that's kind of like, it kind of slows your deck down because it doesn't really do anything except unless they have something. So it's kind of a card that is not really proactive, as your whole deck is kind of proactive, and I think that you want it to be more of a proactive card versus a reactive card. And yeah, sure, you can play it on turn 1 and name Jace, and all the 4 Jaces that are in their hand don't work. But it's just one of those cards that's kind of like a gimmicky card, I think. But
I think it depends on how you play it. So a lot of people view Pithy Needle, like yourself, as a reactive card, but I think that you can play it as a proactive card. So if you know that, against a deck that their best card against you is Elspeth, Sun's Champion, the only way you're going to lose is if they tailor a game plan to where they can stabilize, cast Elspeth, and pull ahead. If you're able to cast the Pithy Needle in the early to mid game and keep them off being able to use that, then you get to push through their best card. Plus, since we're all in on token, well, we're not all in on tokens, but we have a huge token theme to the deck. It's actually a good way to stop Ratchet Bomb, which I think is very relevant.
Which is a card I did forget about. now that it's at M14.
Absolutely. Next, we do have Glare of Heresy, which is another good answer to Elspeth, but it's also very good against opposing Voice of Resurgence. So Voice is one of those unique cards that is good against all 3 deck types. So we don't see very many of these cards in Magic. Voice is one of them. So against the aggressive decks, it can block, replace itself, token gets big and just becomes a huge blocker.
Mm-hmm.
Against the control decks, it forces them to play on their turn instead of ours, and is a threat after they actually remove it. And then in the mid-range decks, it just serves as this 2/2 that does nothing, and then becomes like a 9/9 token in the mid-game once you guys are in a stalemate. So Voice is a card that's very good against all 3 deck types, and I think that Glare of Heresy is going to just continue to get better the more people realize Voice is just absurd.
Agreed. I'm actually in love with the card. It's just, not only does it hit Detention Sphere, it hits Elspeth, it hits Voice, it hits literally everything. Yeah, Chain to the Rocks.
All kinds of
stuff. That's really good.
Now, we do have 2 Druid's Deliverance. So similar to the Rootborn Defenses, this is just another Populate card that is piggybacked onto another good effect for us.
Right.
So Rootborn Defenses will let us, save our team when we attack, and into a bunch of guys, and Populate. Druid's Deliverance will allow us to not die while we're racing, and then populate and kill our opponent out of nowhere. So it's particularly effective with cards like Advent of the Worm. So a lot of times you can just like attack them with your guys, and then they're just going to attack you back trying to race. You fog, make another 5/5, and they just take 15 and die.
Yeah, definitely a good sideboard card for the red decks and other opposing. I think it's probably good in the mirror match too, maybe.
I think you probably want it against anything that has Advent of the Worm in it.
Okay.
So and like the mirror match, the Naya decks, anything like that. It's also very good against cards like Stormbreath Dragon. So they're just like, attack you, monstrous for 7, and so I'll fog, take 1 less from the monstrous, and then not take the 7.
Right.
Sundering Growth is just another again populate piggybacked onto a disenchant effect for us. Among all the other cards that we get to kill, I think this one's very important to kill. Unflinching Courage. So in the mirror match, I guess Glare also hits it too. Man, it just does everything. So in the mirror match, Unflinching Courage is a very good card, against the other green-white decks, just because a lot of times you end up racing and your guys are just all the same, so you need some way to try and break parity. So making something, a +2/+2 lifelink and trample is a really good way to push through damage. And we've moved 3 to the main deck, which we normally didn't have before. And I think I really like that with the deck.
Yeah, I really want to touch on that a little bit, how it's more of like a metagame call, moving the 3 to the main deck. The week before, there were lots of blue-white decks where Unflinching Courage is not very good against those. But, you see these red decks just dominating Owen and the other guy who actually won the tournament with it. They're just so good. If you ever resolve one, you're very far ahead against the red decks, and it's really hard for them to come back. And I mean, that's the same thing pretty much with Tristani too, where she's just a huge monster that gains tons of life, and where it's not very good against these blue decks. But the thing is that these blue decks, there were no blue decks in the top 8 of the last Open. So I think it was a really good metagame call for him, and I think it's just probably good right now, coming up into the...
Definitely, I do agree. And I think that with like Experiment 1 and Fleecemane Lions and Boon Satyrs in the main deck, we're already set up pretty well against the blue decks. So we just need to, we can use the majority of the sideboard to shore up the, the hyper-aggressive matches.
Right.
Which is, why we have the Courage, Tristani, and then we have a Centaur Healer. I guess it's cute. I like Centaur Healer.
I like Centaur Healer
I'm not going to lie. I also really like a Johnny Callholder Pride. I feel like Johnny has a spot in the main deck of the green-white decks.
Yeah.
And the other green-white deck from the top 8 actually played 2 in his main deck.
Oh, okay.
So I definitely think a Johnny is going to be very good moving forward. And then we have a Hunt the Hunter. So there's quite a few things that this can actually kill. So Voice of Resurgence, opposing Advent of the Worms. We can also kill like Scavenging Oozes. We can kill Fleecemane Lions, etc., etc. So if we ever get to, like if we're on the play and we play a 2-drop into their 2-drop, and then we play a 2-drop, fight theirs with our previous 2-drop, and we just get to bash them for 5 and have 2 creatures and they have none. So that seems pretty sweet, and I think in the future we probably want to see more of these.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, especially if you're predicting like a lot of the green-white mirror matches that come up, where Unflinching Courage is good, but this card, the one mana is really what gets me. That you can plus your creature and then kill their creature. It's just a really good card.
It's like a mini Domri.
Right.
All right, so that is the sideboard for the green-white deck. I'm really excited to see how this matchup plays out once we get to take a look at Kenny's deck. I think it's very powerful, very unique. So let's go ahead and take a look at Kenny's deck, and then we can battle.